Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar of the new decade. Huge topic grabbing headlines across, I think, everybody's screens. The role of energy efficiency in decarbonizing buildings, decarbonization being a major topic in the zeitgeist right now. I want to thank our sponsor, the LA Department of Water and Power, as always, for supporting this educational content that we put out on a monthly basis. A few housekeeping items before we get into it. As always, you'll get the slides and the recording with a summary of the key takeaways by Friday. To keep everything orderly, attendee lines will be muted. We had well over 100 people register today, so great to see that turnout. There will be plenty of time, I hope, for questions at the end, so please do type those in to the chat box that you should see on your screen, and we'll make an effort to get to as many of those as we can. And as always, we appreciate any feedback. What did you love? How can we make it even more relevant and timely? What can we do better? And that will be also requested when the follow-up goes out. My name is Dave Hodgins. I run the LA Better Buildings Challenge, and I'm really happy to have David Jaco on for our first webinar of this year. We had him on last year again to really talk about his vision and priorities as we head into this new year and this new decade. It's a really exciting and dynamic time, especially for him in his pivotal role within the department. A couple of key objectives, if I could summarize it. How does efficiency fit into building decarb? There's a lot of moving parts. I'll try to set the stage a little bit from that, and then really it's to hear from David today about how he's looking at this and DWP's priorities in that context. Efficiency is the key. Efficiency is here today. It makes sense now, and I hope that is clear up front and will be a theme throughout. And really understanding how efficiency fits into this broader conversation about decarbonization of buildings and the broader economy. So a little bit of context before we get into the conversation with David. At the state level, California is moving heavily in this direction. States across the country, I think we're up to over 9 at this point, have adopted 100% clean energy targets over some timeline. Investment in the space is lining up. We saw the report from Larry Fink at BlackRock that the world's largest asset manager is really starting to integrate climate risk into their business decisions and starting to push on companies to do the same, kicking out management that's not on board and so forth. And then on the consumer side, not just amongst youth, but up and down and sideways across the base of consumers, more interest in greener products and making greener choices. LA has been big on this for a long time, of course, as you all know, so I won't read all of this, but these are key targets from the newest version of the city's Sustainable City Plan, and specifically related to the grid, to zero carbon buildings by 2030, new buildings, excuse me, and all buildings by 2050. And all of this together adds up, to say it simply, to put us on track to meet the targets that the best science agrees we need to hit in order to stay below 1.5 C, which basically means keeping this a nice place to live. Some near-term milestones moving towards that. Our near-term goal is 22% by 2025. On the renewable side, moving upwards, and again, new construction, its own thing. Also goals on water. These are both priorities within the LA Better Buildings Challenge, and both fall under David's purview within the department as the Director of Efficiency Solutions. And all of this is complicated, as I alluded to, and David will get into. Integrating more renewables onto the grid is not a simple thing. Solar and wind are intermittent, meaning they're not on all the time. The solar is only happening when the sun is shining, obviously, and the wind isn't always blowing as hard, though it can blow at night. So managing that from the utilities perspective is a challenge. I think most of you are probably aware of that, but storage is going to be a huge component of that solution, and keeping rates competitive in that context. And of course, DWP, being municipally owned utility, is very focused and committed to that. The way we get there as fast as possible is really with efficiency. And just here's a quick snapshot of some of the progress that DWP has made. And David, I'll be happy to come back to any of these slides later if you'd like. But again, doing a tremendous job of leading in this area, transitioning to cleaner sources of energy. And this is not directly within David's department, but something that, his purview, but a topic of future webinars. And really all of this comes together as we're going to get into today, but with efficiency here as a solution that we can move on now. And as a way of mitigating strain on the grid as we grow loads, as we electrify transportation, buildings, as we continue to see the proliferation of consumer electronics and more powerful home computing and cloud computing. So efficiency is a way to help make this all work without crashing. So with that, that was a very quick overview, but I'd like to welcome David Jacot, Director of Efficiency Solutions from LADWP. And I have a few questions prepared, but I hope that this will be really interactive with the audience today too. And David, feel free to take this in whatever direction you like as we go. So first question, the headlines are really dominated by all of this news about 100% clean energy, 100% renewable energy, parsing those terms, intersected on the wonkier channels that I listen to with grid reliability talk, electrification of buildings, transportation. So as the Director of Efficiency Solutions, how do you see the role of efficiency in this context?
Thank you, David. This is David Jacot, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Thank you all for joining on this webinar. Thanks, Dave of LABBC for setting it up. Yeah, this is, you've covered a lot of material in setting the context, and it's important. It's important we understand there's a lot of moving parts to this, but it boils down, to my mind, it boils down pretty straightforward from a policy standpoint. What the state and what the city is trying to accomplish is decarbonizing our economy. That's pretty much, that's the policy imperative from a climate change standpoint, is to decarbonize the economy. I'll also add that there's a very important second part that's not part of the, not necessarily part of the topic today. I'm happy to discuss it, but the caveat is decarbonize the economy and do it equitably. And there's a whole host of concerns and issues on that side as well. But keeping the discussion focused on decarbonization of the economy, there's a number of statutory requirements at the state level, and then Dave also covered what the city is aiming for aspirationally. But AB 32 requires the greenhouse gas emissions levels by 2050 be 20% of what they were in 1990. So that does allow for some greenhouse gas emissions, but like I said, 1/5 of the 1990 levels. The other one that's a very, very significant interest to the utilities and us is SB 100, which mandates by 2045 that all the electricity we supply across our grid is carbon-free. And so if at first it seems a disconnect, well, 20% of 1990 versus 100%, that disconnect isn't really a disconnect. The power sector has to be 100% clean, carbon-free energy by 2045. And the economy itself, the larger economy, has to be decarbonized 80% versus 1990 by 2050. I point that out because sometimes with the different timeframes and different reduction levels, it can get a little confusing as to exactly what we're trying to achieve here. What that does, that 20% allows us to keep some functions in the economy that just simply aren't, at least with today's technology or visibly in the near future technology, decarbonizable. That said, the grid most certainly is decarbonizable. And so where energy efficiency fits into that, it's foundational. as Dave pointed out, as we build out more solar, more wind, there's not a whole lot more hydro we can build except in terms of pump storage. But as we build out those decarbonized electricity sources, at the same time, we're also trying to promote electric vehicles, electricity in buildings is part of this discussion, primarily how we decarbonize buildings through multiple means. Electrifying end uses is one, renewable natural gas is another one. But what we see is that we have tremendous upward pressure on the amount of electricity we'll be expected to provide through our system. And at the same time, all that electricity needs to be decarbonized. So we have some dual challenges here. We've looked at what it does, just a hypothetical. We just run a hypothetical to kind of bookend the range of possibilities. If we completely electrify transportation within the city of Los Angeles, cars, trucks, buses, heavy-duty trucks, we're looking at roughly, just an estimate, but roughly doubling the amount of electricity we need to provide. Electrifying buildings to a large degree can add another 30%, so 30 to 50%. So we're looking at potentially 2.5 times more supplied electricity from a kWh standpoint in a fully electrified scenario. Again, that's the extreme case, but we need to understand the range of possibilities. That's a tremendous increase and a tremendous strain on our system. Energy efficiency comes in key as helping maximize the capacity of the existing system so that we have to invest less, not zero, but less than we otherwise would have to accommodate the new loads we see coming from electrification. And that's making the best use of your system. And that's also, as Dave mentioned, working to keep our rates as low as possible. We don't want duplicative investments in infrastructure when we could get more out of existing infrastructure by being more efficient.
Thanks, David. And I think that point you made that I wanted to underline is that it's really about maximizing the capacity of the existing infrastructure that's in place. I think it's easy for people I hear people focusing so much on the new generation side as if that's going to come online very quickly, but really efficiency is here to do now, and it's maximizing the capacity of our existing system, and loads are going up even if we're not electrifying buildings or transportation at the rate that we need to or aspire to, just through the average energy use per person plugging in more devices is increasing regardless of those other trends too.
Absolutely, so, and it's important to also understand that those system infrastructure investments can be at the macro level, such as power generation and transmission lines that come over the mountains to deliver the large solar fields we're building or being built on our behalf, but also at the local distribution level. Individual circuits throughout the city. There's certain circuits that are already running 110% of design capacity, and you put a few more Teslas or a few more high-speed or high-voltage electric vehicle chargers on those circuits, and you can have some overloading problems there as well. And so those also present localized opportunities for energy efficiency to reduce the other loads that are on those circuits and get more capacity and more use out of those existing circuits and distribution stations.
Mm-hmm. Is that a conversation that's happening within the department where you've got these localized known specific strains on certain circuits to try to address those through efficiency?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a joint effort underway, and I think you touched on it earlier when you mentioned the Distributed Energy Resources Initiative. We are working actively with Power System and with our other demand side management or distributed energy resources groups to look at we're looking at 4 currently circuits that are at or over capacity an unacceptable amount of time of the year. And what we do is we map the customer accounts that are on those circuits. We determine what types of customers we're serving, And then we look for opportunities to deliver to those specific customer segments, whether it's residential or commercial or multifamily, or perhaps industrial. What offerings we have across all of our portfolio of programs for our customers that can help them either reduce their energy consumption overall through energy efficiency, and do a special promotion to those areas, or our demand response efforts, which provide incentives to shift loads as we need.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think I was getting a little bit ahead to another question I had, but that seemed timely. So zooming out a little bit and going back to just the huge amount, which is what we want, of more renewables coming onto the grid. That's at a high level. Some of the IOUs are saying that EE is not as much of a priority anymore. It's really about how do we shift loads, how do we store energy, and are kind of de-emphasizing efficiency. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so in full disclosure, I have been on the IOU side of the equation. I worked for almost 10 years at Southern California Edison before I came to LADWP. So I think I can present somewhat of a nuanced interpretation or discussion on this issue. We definitely see at the statewide level the IOUs who are regulated by the CPUC doing some pullback on energy efficiency. And there's a variety of factors guiding that, not least of which is some of the cost effectiveness assumptions that I personally believe are short-sighted on the part of the California Public Utilities Commission. And it's making it such that it's very difficult for the IOUs to produce a comprehensive energy efficiency portfolio, to propose a comprehensive energy efficiency portfolio at the scale at which they historically have. There's a lot of measures that they're not doing anymore, even though I don't believe the market is saturated, but they don't pencil out on these cost effectiveness tests that are regulated, developed by the CPUC and imposed upon the IOUs. Now, so that's one issue, and so we've seen some pullback on the amount of investment that the IOUs feel they're able to make in energy efficiency, because they don't want to be investing in stuff that doesn't look cost effective. My feeling on that is that these cost effectiveness tests, they may reflect the present reality, they may reflect present consumption, present generation, present population, present climate, present levels of electrification. But that's not where California's headed. So, what we're trying to do here at LADWP is not make 30-year decisions on the basis of a snapshot of today or tomorrow or the next year. We're trying to anticipate where we're going to be where we want to be in 30 years, where we're going to be in 30 years, and make these long-term decisions in these investments, both on the infrastructure side and on the customer infrastructure side, which is what energy efficiency is, in light of a much longer term analysis. So one thing I hear, and I've heard this from the IOUs, I've heard, well, we're going to be 100% renewable or decarbonized by 2045. It's mandated. At that point, energy efficiency is no longer a contributor to greenhouse gas reduction. You're saving energy, but it's not reducing greenhouse gas. And I hear that argument today. Energy efficiency at the wrong time of day has a net negative cost effectiveness, because we've got solar oversupply at 4 p.m., so we don't want energy efficiency at 4 p.m. First off, I posit that the long-term solution to intermittent oversupply of renewables is not energy inefficiency, it's storage, more storage. Store that excess so we can get through the night with it. Store that excess so we can get through the winters with it, because we have intermittency at both a daily and a seasonal level. So you want as much energy efficiency as possible during those times of solar, quote, oversupply, if you have the storage to take it to get you through the night or through the season in a long-term storage scenario. So that's one big area there. The other thing with the IOUs, and their heart's in the right place. I've worked for, like I said, I work for Edison, the great people over there. So I don't want anybody to take away the wrong impression that they're not doing everything they can in the right direction. But the issue, the other piece I would put out there is the way the IOU side has become structured. There doesn't seem to be a financial incentive necessarily for any of the parties on the IOU side to be aggressively promoting energy efficiency. The IOUs have, for the most part, gotten out of the generation business. There's exceptions, of course. And so you've got a lot of merchant generators, and they make their money off retailing kilowatt hours. You've got the CCAs, the community choice aggregators, which have taken over a good chunk of the retail side of actually procuring the energy and selling it to customers. And you've got the IOUs in between, which are the ones who are transmitting that generated electricity to customers and maintaining those distribution systems and transmission systems. The CCAs also make their money off the retail of kilowatt hours. So energy efficiency, while it's a nice thing for everybody to do, at the moment I don't see, and I could be way off base. Maybe there's something in the works to fix this, but I don't see where there's an incentive for any of the players with the way the IOU side is structured now to really be invested in energy efficiency as a resource rather than as a nice to have. When people, and let me just finish on this point, when people talk about devaluing energy efficiency because it doesn't contribute as much greenhouse gas savings and will contribute zero theoretically when the grid is decarbonized, I ask, well, are the customers billed by GHG? No, customers are billed by kilowatt hours. The customer will still benefit. There's still tremendous benefit to the customer to do energy efficiency, even if it's not benefiting the various players. Us on the POU side with LADWP, we're still pretty much vertically integrated, so we have to make it work. We have to make the decarbonization work, but we also have to make sure our rates stay low. So you got one person to hold accountable as opposed to 3 or 4 potential entities on the IOU side.
Right. So we've got some structural and sort of business model differences, we'll say, between the way a municipal utility like DWP and an IOU like Edison, just as a for example, are set up and incentivized, and looking at this and then tying that to, as an investor-owned utility, a fiduciary, responsibility to maximize sort of quarterly earnings, if you will, versus DWP as a muni looking further out to 2030, 2050, and thinking about other co-benefits like putting dollars back in the pocket of customers. You touched on equity, and I know that's a major focus with the equity metrics now within the department. So fascinating to see how this is evolving, and I just wrote down the point that even in 100% renewable energy scenario, saving energy is still putting dollars back in customers' pockets, even if it's not having a GHG, a direct GHG impact. I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, and I would close out on this one by mentioning that, my response when people say we won't need energy efficiency because we'll be 100% renewable. I don't think we get to 100% renewable without our 100% decarbonized grid without massive energy efficiency, because the cost of trying to increase our infrastructure, build out our infrastructure, expand the capacity by 2 to 2.5 times is going to result, in my opinion, in such a backlash that it would never happen. That's why energy efficiency is a prerequisite to getting the grid decarbonized.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what about transportation? We're talking about buildings here, but in LA, if we look at the pie chart, transportation accounts for the largest chunk of our direct emissions in LA. Obviously, people are charging their EVs or trucks at buildings generally. So kind of what's the nexus there? How do those two things intersect within the department right now?
Well, like I mentioned, we have a working group on that. Electric vehicles represent new load to our system. Energy efficiency takes load off of our system. Demand response takes load off of our system. So we're absolutely working very closely with our electric vehicle policy folks. And in fact, electric vehicle policy is integrated in the same department I'm in under my boss, Nancy Sutley. And we want to balance those out. We want to see as much electrification of transportation as possible. I have an electric car. I love it. The driving dynamics are superior. The operating costs are superior. It's only the first cost that's the issue. And then of course the range issue. So, we're trying to get as many chargers throughout the city as possible, recognizing that we're adding load. And we're adding a lot of load in certain areas, especially if you start talking truck stops for the port that are 800 volt fast chargers, and the incredible point load that creates. And how do we offset that through efficiency, demand response, and of course there will be infrastructure upgrades. Obviously, well, that'll be a big part of it. Drawing back on what I said earlier about energy efficiency, increasing the capacity of the existing system and optimizing it, I got a good example on this one, specifically around transportation. So over the last 5 or 6 years, the city of LA has retrofitted the entire streetlight system, and in this 188,000 overhead streetlights. And we've essentially cut the wattage on those, working through Public Works, who actually oversees the street lights. We've cut the wattage on those in half. So the lights that are in now, the LED lights that are in now, draw half the amount of power the old lights did. Well, of course, the wiring on these circuits from lamp to lamp didn't change, from pole to pole. We didn't rip it out and put in smaller wiring. So now we have all this legacy infrastructure, this wiring that's oversized for the current load, and that's these 50% more efficient LED streetlights. Well, we're using that excess capacity. We're putting pole-mounted electric vehicle chargers in neighborhoods that in neighborhoods that are heavy on multifamily properties that don't necessarily have off-street parking where they can charge. And we estimate we can put between 6,000 and 12,000 EV chargers, tier 2, that's 240 volt EV chargers, on streetlight circuits throughout the city. That distributed infrastructure is existing. It's legacy. It was built and paid for decades ago. And because we've decreased the load on its primary usage, which is street lighting, we're now able to add in these chargers at no cost other than the charger, the installation, and of course the meter. That's a on-the-ground example of what I mean by using energy efficiency to milk more capacity or optimize an existing resource.
That's a great example. We've got some questions coming in from the audience that are incredibly relevant. So what are some of the leading, just bringing it back within your immediate group, what are some of the leading energy efficiency programs right now where you're seeing the biggest impact? What current programs do you think are really leading the way towards electrification or decarbonization, however you want to take that?
Well, one of the things that's been really exciting for me to watch unfold over the last few years, pretty much within my tenure at DWP, is how quickly LEDs have emerged and diversified and advanced sufficiently to pretty much handle most lighting applications. There's some process applications it doesn't work for, but in terms of any indoor use, task lighting, overhead lighting, outdoor use, street lighting, parking lot lighting, and that's across residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, government, universities, hospitals. LED is there now in terms of being able to satisfy all of those end uses. So a vision we put in place over the last couple of years is to achieve a 100% retrofit of the city, and that means everyone, all the buildings, all the homes, all the offices, to LED lighting. It's proven itself to be durable, non-toxic, energy efficient, and with the diversity of product, it can be ubiquitous. So that's one thing, and we have programs to support that. We've got a commercial direct install program that does lighting retrofits for free for qualified eligible customers. We have rebate programs for larger commercial customers for lighting. So that's the lighting side. We also have, this is becoming a hotter climate, and air conditioning is only more and more prevalent. A lot of old LA residential was built without AC, air conditioning, and now that it's getting hotter, people are getting these either secondhand window air conditioners or cheap commodity product at $100 for a unit. Yeah, it cools the place, but it doubles their electric bill. So we've got a major push into more efficient air conditioning systems, and that's at the residential level. We have an AC optimization program for residential and small commercial. At the AC tune-up is basically what it is. But we also have a very robust custom performance program that helps our larger buildings with built-up systems like chillers and cooling towers maximize the efficiency of those systems, both in operations through retrocommissioning, but also on retrofit. And then the third place is helping new buildings be as energy efficient as possible, going beyond code and installing the latest efficiency technologies. And we're also looking at ways to further decarbonize new buildings through electrification potentially, as well as embodied carbon when the building's built, trying to find lower carbon manufacturing, construction, and product choices.
Great. So really comprehensive range, and you touched on a few that I'm really excited about. You touched on the custom performance program, really geared towards the larger customers, and there relatively recently, within the last 18 months, there's a shift to try to simplify the intake process, put some measurement and verification protocols in place up front, and some reorganization around how the review takes place. What's been the feedback so far over the past year, both, I guess, internally and anecdotally from, if it filters up to you, from customers?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would welcome the audience feedback if folks want to send in questions or comments on this. My understanding and my perception is that we have improved. It's still not perfect, but we've got our review times much lower now. We're able to take advantage of some additional resources to streamline how we acquire the information we need up front on the application, when we do the pre-inspection to verify the existing conditions, and then either assistance with the energy calculations or review of energy calculations provided to us by the customer or their engineering firm or the contractor. I believe we have managed to significantly increase the throughput for the custom performance program and be much more responsive to our customers. One thing that has always been a disconnect between utility programs and customer construction timelines is that the utility, we're paying out a rebate. That's ratepayer money, by the way. All our energy efficiency programs are funded through ratepayer money. So we obviously have to make sure, to the best of our ability, that we're getting the return on investment for us and for our customers for those dollars we're spending. So we got to make sure the savings are real. That's to the best of our ability. That's the bottom line. The project is going to save the amount of energy we expect it to save. The customer is going to get the amount of savings and bill reductions for the investment that they're making. So it's a quality control, quality assurance process. So that's but sometimes, because there's a lot of data requirements, and it can get out of sync with the customer's construction timeline or their budget cycle. Customers often have annual budgets, and if they don't spend the money by the end of the year, it disappears, and they have to argue for it again all over the next year. So there can be those misalignments in cycle time, which is why I believe that with the enhancements we've made in the program and been able to both shorten the overall timeline, but also give more certainty up front, that we have improved the ability for our large customers to take advantage of our programs. But I welcome, any and all feedback, supportive, contradictory, or in between.
Great. We'll include that an opportunity for folks to check around and provide that feedback with the follow-up. And I think everybody appreciates your interest in that. Going back to the question of budgets, and I think one of our previous discussion topics, how are budgets trending within the department? If you could talk a bit about that, because I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I do too. When I started here at DWP, we had about a $50 million a year budget for energy efficiency, and what that is obviously it pays for our staff to support it, but primarily, the bulk of it, 80–90%, goes to customers in the form of either rebates or incentives or some combination, or technical resources, technical support. It's directly delivered to our customers, participating customers in the programs. Now, that was $50 million. We quickly raised the budget. The need was apparent. In fact, when I started, I was handed a much larger budget. We've ramped up to it. But now we're at over a $200 million a year budget. And by comparison, that $200 million a year budget just to promote energy efficiency, just to help our customers overcome first costs or transaction costs of participating in the program to adopt better than standard practice or code required energy efficiency. Energy efficient equipment and technologies. $200 million a year for that. The last numbers I've heard, by comparison, I believe Edison, because of the cost effectiveness challenges they've seen with their portfolio due to the way it's been calculated, required to be calculated by the CPUC, the last I heard, their proposed budget was $150 million a year. And Edison is 3 times larger than LADWP. In terms of number of customers, the amount of load, amount of retail kilowatt hours per year. But we actually have a bigger budget. And I want to stress, I'm not trying to say that it reflects badly on Edison. I think it reflects badly on the structure of the IOU side from a regulatory and a business model standpoint, the way it's been disaggregated and set up. And it's not an indictment of any particular IOU. It's more an indictment of the system that I feel is broken. Whereas us, as a city-owned, locally owned, vertically integrated utility, we are tasked with some pretty tough targets. You saw from what Dave laid out that from the city's 5-0 campaign and the city's plan and Mayor Garcetti's Green New Deal, we have some very, very lofty targets, and that takes money to achieve. And so we do cost effectiveness as well, but we balance it out, and I think we make much more realistic, reasonable assumptions around looking at the long-term cost effectiveness rather than a snapshot of today's exact conditions. And that's what we base our decisions on, and that's what justifies that higher level of investment in energy efficiency.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also important to note, also going to the point of just how IOUs are regulated and they're required to do things differently than munis have the ability to do, is to pay for performance beyond existing conditions, not just for performance beyond code. And I think it's a more customer-centric approach. But I like to underline that for anyone that's on the line that's looking at allocating capital across a portfolio where you've got assets scattered throughout California. LA is going to pay you, invest, I should say, for performance beyond existing, which is really what's relevant, I think, for people.
Yeah, that's so. Let me build on that a little bit and give an example of where I think we're a little bit more grounded in the reality. What's on the grid? What's impacting the grid? We look at, if we invest, if the customer does this, and we're a party to that. In other words, we help them verify what they had before, what they're putting in, what the estimated savings are, those savings are direct grid impact. You know, we don't discount those savings for whether the customer would have done it anyway or not. We don't care. We care the customer did it right. And we only know if they did it right because we were able to perform our QA, QC process on it. You know, in many aspects, the customer was going to do the project anyway. But we can't count on the savings if we didn't have a hand in it in terms of looking at what the measures were and whether they were installed correctly. And on the more complicated projects, doing the EM&V, the evaluation, measurement, and verification that Dave mentioned. So sometimes the incentive isn't to get the customer to do a project they weren't already contemplating. It's to buy down the transaction costs of participating in our QC process. Either way, we don't care. We just know that we got those savings we can count on in our resource planning and power procurement processes.
Right, and treating efficiency as a resource, it needs to be reliably quantified and measured as you were describing. I think
and not discounted arbitrarily through bad policy.
Exactly. A lot of great questions coming in from the audience. Going back to the storage question, David,
sure.
And feel free to respond to this how you like, of course. But what's the department's view, if you are able to share one, on behind the meter storage as opposed to like utility scale or utility owned storage?
Mm-hmm. Oh, we absolutely need behind the meter storage. I would like to personally see every solar rooftop that's already been installed now go back and add behind the meter storage, or at least contemplate it. The problem, though, we don't have a behind the meter storage incentive program yet because we don't have the interconnect standards haven't been developed. And what I mean by that is there's when you get into electrical equipment, any type of technical, mechanical or electrical equipment, there's interconnection standards. You want to be able to plug something in, and if it meets these specifications, it will work with what's already there, or what the ahead of the meter or the meter side specifications are. Those are not something one utility can develop, because if we do, then another utility might develop something different. And then another utility develops something different. And now, with 4 IOUs in California, 3 electric IOUs, and 45 municipally owned electric companies, you could have up to close to 50 standards. That doesn't work for the industry. That doesn't work for the battery suppliers. It doesn't work for customers. It doesn't work for contractors, installers. So we absolutely have to have a behind the meter storage interconnection standard. And that is in process, I understand. And that is prerequisite to being able to really aggressively start promoting behind the meter storage to customers. We absolutely support it. We want to see it added to existing solar, and we want to see it incorporated with new solar. We just got to get that standard right.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Thank you. We had 2 questions come in that I think I can combine. One is related to high usage or critical facilities such as data centers and hospitals. But another question is, what sectors or types of businesses in LA would be your primary target for efficiency if you could select one, or your top 3?
Okay. Well, you have to balance that with, and this is where I'll have to come in with the equity side, because we can't do one without the other. The nature of California, the nature of the city, the needs of our customers in the aggregate, but also individually, demands that we have to look at everything through both a resource and an equity side. And so we have to then make sure that we are serving those needs as broadly and diversely as possible. So, you can look at it from where's the low-hanging fruit. You'd probably, for low-hanging fruit for energy savings, of course, the campuses, large industrial facilities, and we aggressively work with those customers. But when you look from an equity standpoint, and that's not just lower income customers, it's also the workforce development needs of the city and the region. You've really got to look at multifamily. Multifamily is a huge component of the city. 2/3 of the city, from a population standpoint, from a unit standpoint, lives in multifamily housing, and a good chunk of that, about half probably, is low income, moderate income, and so you really can't. I could never endorse an approach that only looks at the pure kWh savings from a low-hanging fruit, biggest bang for the buck standpoint. You got to look at both. And so the short answer, I'd say two, and one is big institutional or business customers, and the other is multifamily. But beyond that, there's all our single-family customers. They're ratepayers too. They pay into these programs. Everybody who's a customer at DWP pays into these programs. Everybody needs to have an opportunity to maximize their own energy efficiency.
Absolutely. Would you mind expanding a bit more? I know that multifamily, there's a question that just came in also about how the equity metrics are considered. Could you go a little more on the low-income multifamily and some of your strategic initiatives that are underway there?
Yeah, sure, of course. So the equity metrics are our initiative, equity metrics data initiative that was led by one of our former commissioners, and it's been such a great resource to assessing how we're performing in this area that we've maintained it and are working to grow it, as a matter of fact. What we do is we look across the city on a number of dimensions, and some of them are things like reliability, water quality. Others are certain programs that we've targeted specifically for lower income areas, like our direct install program, like our low income refrigerator exchange program. And we assess how we're doing on a geographic basis. You know, we map participation, or in terms of water quality complaints or samples. And on the power reliability side, we look at outages and duration of outages. And we map it across the city, and we look for hotspots. We look for hotspots where we're not serving that area the way we should be serving, or where we have a preponderance of reliability or water quality concerns. So that helps us locate, you know, infrastructure issues within the water and power system, but also opportunities to better target our customer programs to serve otherwise underserved areas. So that's you know, the theory and the purpose behind how we establish and use the equity metrics. For low-income multifamily specifically, this has always been what's considered a difficult customer class to reach. We've done a number of things lately that are very exciting. We've working with stakeholders, NRDC, National Resources Defense Council specifically, but a bunch of other stakeholders that were also part of the process. We actually increased the energy efficiency budget for the next 5 years by $20 million a year, specifically to focus on low-income multifamily and how we can better help those buildings, and of course the tenants who live in those buildings, use less energy, be more comfortable, and save money. So a part of that is developing attic insulation program, an attic insulation program. That's low-hanging fruit. If an attic is uninsulated, the space beneath it is often quite hot, and it has additional energy loads for the air conditioning, if there is air conditioning. So that's a big push, but we're going beyond that. You know, attic insulation isn't enough. We have the opportunity to comprehensively retrofit a bunch of low-income multifamily properties, not just in terms of insulation, that's part of it, but also their internal lighting, their tenant lighting, their common area lighting, the air conditioning systems they have, if they have a central system, if they have window units or central air units in each unit. So we're partnering with the state of California on the low-income weatherization program to help those properties invest in those upgrades and have it be done cost effectively for them, and get those energy savings for them and for their tenants. A lot of those low-income multifamily properties are part of portfolios held by affordable housing developers, which are fixed-income customers themselves. They usually rent-controlled apartments, and those nonprofit affordable housing developers have a fixed income to work with, and typically can't make can't make capital investments out of that income stream. They need to do periodic refinancing and also get incentives and rebates from us and the state, as it were, to undertake those projects. So we're partnering with the state on what's been a very successful model. But for sufficient funding, specifically in LA, we're going to bring a good amount of funding to it. And we really see being able to help a lot of low-income multifamily projects do comprehensive retrofits to their systems to get energy and water savings across the board. We partner with SoCalGas on one version of that program that's already been launched, and we're looking for a larger volume version as well.
Great. Well, going back to workforce development, what is the biggest hurdle? I know this is a challenging area, but what would you say is the biggest hurdle that you face from where you sit in that area?
The biggest hurdle is filling the job pipelines. The jobs are there, but they're not the jobs that are being sold to kids these days. Plumbers. Who's selling plumbing as a profession to high school kids? We should be doing it. We got some trade schools, I think, that do it. Plumbers make six figures. I mean, electricians the same. It doesn't take long after apprenticeship to where they're up in the high fives and getting into the six figures. These are great jobs, but we have a hard time getting the kids interested in them. The current pipeline for professional development in the schools is college, and college is right for a lot of people. College isn't necessarily the best path for other people who are more mechanically inclined or more electrically inclined. We need to get them steered towards these types of programs.
Mm-hmm.
The department has an effort in this regard, actually. It's called the Utility Pre-Craft Trainee Program. And it's a great program that works not just with kids coming out of school, but at-risk folks as well. Folks that are, perhaps previously incarcerated, perhaps mid-stage career crisis, meaning they were in an occupation that's been pretty much eliminated by automation, and at-risk youth, obviously. And it's a great program to get folks into an apprenticeship where they're making already a decent wage with benefits. But it's how much can one company do? We need a much more broad effort in that direction across the entire citywide economy.
Great. Well, David, I want to thank you for your time and thank the audience for all of your great questions. I think this is a good place to wrap. So we will be sending a recap on Friday with some of our key takeaways, and stay tuned for more on next month's interview, which will expand on this important set of topics. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.